Very good evening to all the listeners who are joining into this webinar being hosted by NISTI. NISTI is an organization which is, you can say, a think tank for the textile industry. It is linked to the Textile Institute, Manchester, UK. It was set up in 1989 by a group of professors from IIT Delhi and also certain industrial, doyens of industry at that point in time. Since then, the NISTI has done yeoman service in research, in applications of various new technologies, and also bringing in a kind of connection between industry and academia. However, when we recall, design, technology, and management were part of the post-independent India's what they called at that time as temples of democracy, modern temples of democracy. The institutions were built at that time. And the three institutions, namely IIT Delhi, IIM Ahmedabad, and NID Ahmedabad, surprisingly, were all set up just in 1 year, 1961. I thought, in fact, personally, that because the engineering college started in 1958, that it was like IIT itself from 58, but IIT was also actually set up in 1961. The inauguration was just in August. And IIM was in December. And also NID was not very far at that time, November. So I think it's very important to understand that NISTI also wants to traverse the design, technology, and business. And I was part of NIFT, which had the subtitle, A College of Design, Business, and Technology. And I think that is what will make actually a connection between all these silos if they start working together. Most often, when we look at these are not really brought together on platforms, and that is a big lacuna. So let me start by extending you the greetings of the 75th Independence Day of our country, our dear country, the motherland, and also take this opportunity to loop in the people who are joining from UK. There, I think it is about 11:45 a.m. So the Textile Institute UK has been very kind to popularize through their various media the webinar, and we want to extend a warm welcome to all of them who are joining from different places. We are also happy that a large number of registrations have happened, and we do hope that without delay, they would all be joining in. As introductory remarks, I want to just go back in time a bit, couple of minutes. When I was part of National Handloom Development Corporation, we had the great opportunity to meet Shyam Benegal. In 1987, the film came out, Susman. Actually, the film's work happened in 85, 86. And National Handloom Development Corporation had a small role to play. And when you see the Susman film and the Ramulu, who is from Pochampalli, the character, the Ikat weaver, and his entire desire of, making his child, come up. And he says somewhere in the film that, but I don't want him to have this kind of a life. You again fast forward this, and Priyadarshan, the film director, made this film, not really a remake of Susman, but a similar kind of a theme, which was not set up in Pochampalli, which was like Susman. This was set in Kanjivaram. And the character in the film, entire his life ambition was that when his child grows up, that girl should have a silk sari on her wedding day. Both these stories give you a really poignant lesson that the weavers who are weaving this beautiful Ikat Pochampalli or the Kanjivaram never get to wear or buy that particular sari they are weaving. And their children will never wear probably, and it is a very sad ending to Kanjivaram, where because of the brother's debt, all the money he saved to buy the silk sari goes into meeting that debt. Why I said is that, when we have the 75th Independence Day being celebrated, we must also look at what the Textile Ministry's 2020-21 annual report says. It says two things. One, it has got 45 million people employed by the textile sector. It also have 100 million people deriving livelihood from the sector. And you must have all seen the fabric map of India and the kind of diversity If diversity is defense, this is the biggest defense for a country in creativity. Every place has a different kind of weave, a kind of tradition, which is really laudable and mesmeric. And when you really look at, the kind of things which have happened in the past, we also see that the weavers and the craftsmen have not been taken care of by the industry, by the commerce, and the industrialization really destroyed their livelihoods. I remember the plastic covered looms in Balaramapuram, where beautiful kasav saris are made, or in Kannur, Calicut belt, where the chins originated. When you read the 12th and 11th century, when the Portuguese traders came to Calicut, from where the calico name came in, and the chins, the book which came out recently on the cloth that changed the world, which is about chins. And is normally, only the very ornamental fabrics are talked about, but the daily use fabrics, as Subrata was telling me in a conversation, that is something which you don't find in museums or written about. But the chins from India, which really changed the world in terms of industrial fabric manufacturing later, certainly was a daily fabric. So the point I am trying to say is that India has this great diversity and heritage of both ornamental value added, as Vandana's book would say, about gold and silver thread embellished fabrics, to the wedding fabrics, to various kinds of art forms which you see, and to Gopika's various explorations of embroidery, the embellishments and value additions. And then you have also daily fabrics, the gingham checks and the crepe fabrics and the chins fabrics. So with this kind of a large diversity which we see in our country, it is a great evening, Independence Day Eve, to remember these great craftsmen, the karigars. And when you read the Mandira, the character in the film, which says at the end that, these craftsmen have to also survive during the industrialized society context. We need to find a way of protecting them, nurturing them, improving them. And that is a very poignant scene in the film. So obviously, we are very delighted that such a group of people who have accomplishments runs into pages of each one's curriculum vitae in arts and crafts and explorations in textiles. It's a great evening to have all of you. I called it a fireside chat. And, I was asked, why are you calling it a fireside chat? I said, the authors are of such caliber. They can really be providing you a lot of fire for thought. And that is where probably, this evening becomes very fruitful, very value added and memorable. And I want to again welcome all those who have joined for this webinar. And again, extend you the warmest greetings of our country's Independence Day, and hope that the three words which are used in the title of this theme, leveraging the textile heritage for leadership. So there is heritage, there is leveraging, that is making the best use of it, and to create leadership. If you want to just have used a policy, and if you have read the press statement of the CEO of NITI Aayog, if you keep imitating China, you can never be a factory to the world. I wrote in my book in 94, 95, the Garment Exports Winning Strategies. The biggest strategy which can position India is becoming a creative manufacturer of textile and apparel. There are many studies which shows that these intangibles, which are design and crafts and traditions, are more value adding and more return on investment than the real value addition through purely manufacturing process. So the importance of arts, crafts, design need to be really thought by India as a fortress for going forward in creating a new global leadership for Indian textile industry. With these words, I would briefly introduce the panelists, so that I don't have to interrupt when they are presenting. We start with Subrata Bhaumik, who is probably the most, endowed textile and graphic designer. Worldwide, he is well known. The number of awards he has won, the biennales which has featured his posters, the kind of works which he has done for Calico Museum as the design director, and being a first batch of postgraduate program graduate in industrial design from National Institute of Design. It was always a great pleasure meeting him in Ahmedabad. And I am always, we had this Delhi Design Festival when I met him a couple of years back, 3-4 years back. And he was, as prolific as one can be in terms of various versatile design explorations. So it's great to have Subrata Bhaumik here today. And I wanted to actually have him desperately because the Calico Museum represents the biggest textile traditions which are nurtured and for posterity. And that is very important to have his presence also because of that since he has been closely associated with that museum. Going to Dr. Alka Pandey, as a curator, art critique, author, the kind of roles and the hats which she has worn, and the 30 years of being part of the world of art, having double MA and a PhD in a concept which is for India. Ardhanarishwara concept is something which is innate and inherent to our thinking. So I think Alka Pandey's work recently, when she was curating the Biennale of Indian Museums in the newly done Bihar Museum, she was sending us the details of the kind of workshops which is happening in that museum, and also the books like the Flower Shower. I was very impressed that the floral traditions of India and what role does it play are all captured in her book. Similarly, the masterpieces of Indian art, another great work by her. So it's great to have Dr. Alka Pandey in this amidst us today. Archana Shastri, Professor Archana Shastri was my colleague at National Institute of Fashion Technology. Both of us probably joined in 1988, or I came back in 1988 and she joined at that time. And since then, one has seen her growth. And the last post which she held till September 2020 was one of the most important posts, I would say, because these are not easy to come by. She was the director of the Mekong Ganga Asian Traditional Textiles Museum, situated in Siem Reap in Cambodia. And the kind of work she has done, personally, I was lucky to have visited while she was the director, and the kind of work which is happening in that was really remarkable. So it's great to have Archana, a versatile, designer, visual artist, because she studied visual communication from NID before her MFA. Before that, she had done her MFA. So obviously, a great resource to have today. We have also Gopika Nath. I think she has started teaching much before I started teaching in NIFT. She was teaching at IIT Delhi, and a great textile artist, author, critique. Her blogs, I think it should be a must read for those who want to see her capability as a wordsmith, just as much as she is an incredible artist, textile artist, craft person in embroidery and textile design and similar explorations in textiles. So her reservoir of understanding will be very useful for those who are listening to today's webinar. We have Professor Vandana Bhandari, who was again a colleague of mine while I was at NIFT, and she had later become Dean of Academics in NIFT. She was also, a project head for the very important project called Ustad, which NIFT has been doing, and she is the moving force behind it. Her books on, particularly on Rajasthan's textiles, and also on textile and crafts, along with a couple of other colleagues, which she has done a couple of works on that. And I saw another work on wedding dresses and traditions in India. So she is, her recent book, I think this year itself, a book has come out on Rajasthan, textiles of Rajasthan. And I think the kind of the body of work which she has produced, and her PhD work in this area, same area, are really for the people who are listening to this. It will be a scholarly kind of erudite exploration which she will provide today. Somesh Singh was a colleague of mine at NID when he was heading the apparel design program. Before that, he was a student of NIFT Gandhinagar. And later, what you see is that he became a true innovator in many respects. Innovating on fabrics, innovating on various kinds of apparel. The latest one being in cement, and setting up of, along with his wife Iti, the craft village, has been a significant event 5 years back. And when I was talking to him preparing for this webinar, he has some very interesting business models by which craft could become part of India's unicorns in the business world. So I think we have a great feast of ideas and explorations to be presented in this. And you should not be in a great hurry in this particular webinar. If you are looking at a TV kind of, just some brief statements being said, what they call a sound bite, this is not the place today. This place is for a slow fashion, just taking the slides and the presentations calmly and a little bit with patience, so that you are able to get a full, because this is a masterclass. You can't obviously get these kind of people together on a screen, which you are lucky because of the COVID, we are able to do virtually, people sitting in Ahmedabad, people sitting in Goa like Govika, and all of us joining together to present you this feast of discussion to celebrate India's textile heritage. So I now present and hand over to Mr. Subrado Bhaumik, who is going to take you through his presentation.
Namaskar. First of all, I'm really grateful to Dr. Koshi for inviting me to talk about textiles, mostly the heritage, not mill-made textiles. But I want to dedicate my talk to my mother, Gira Sarabai, who just passed a few weeks back. All this what you are seeing, as she used to tell me, that I didn't make the Calico Museum. I made it a show window for Indian textiles. And whenever anybody came, they will come with the dealer. They said, oh, this is one, I can give you 50 of them. And that's why I think most of our most important textiles has already gone after independence, which is sad one way. And a lot of these Indian textiles, especially the heritage textiles, has gone away from this country. A lot of people like it. The idea is it has gone, we can see it properly. Here we don't. So I was talking to Koshi in discussion whether we see a museum or a photograph of an object. How does it matter? I don't know any of the museum in our country one can touch and feel. Apart from that, the people who are supposed to really practice, they don't get to see this museum. It's like Koshi is talking about that Kanjivaram or the weaver's family. They don't get to see that even sometime. Now, looking at it, if we talk about museum, what does the actually medium definition by ICOM, International Council of Museum? I'll read it out a little bit so we know where we stand for museum. According to ICOM statutes adopted by the 22nd General Assembly in Vienna, Austria on 24th August 2007, the current definition is as follows. A museum is a non-profit, permanent institution in the service of society and its development open to the public, which acquires, conserves, researches, communicates, and exhibits the tangible and intangible heritage of humanity and its environment for the purpose of education, study, and enjoyment. Now, it is the catch. How can you go to the museum here in India? Most of them will not allow you to stay there for a long time. Research or see, feel, look. You go and, as we have come to see a picture, that will not work for the museum purpose. Museum is somebody who wants to absorb, wants to feel, wants to look at in detail. Museum is not a hurried kind of seeing a picture in a film. So that is one of the most important thing we lack. We have museum, approximately 800 museums in India. But the point is how many are in textile museum? I am going to talk only on textiles because I've been born with this. Though Dr. Koshi said that I was in Calico Museum, yes, 50-50. I was in the morning in the industrial textiles, which is called Calico Cloth, Calico Mills, and which was not registered even after 100 years, the name Calico, because it was a dictionary word. Now, when we got it registered somehow as a design, not as a name, it collapsed. But this same mill has also collapsed, not mill textile industry itself, where is a power loom or mill-made textiles, they killed or handcrafted textiles. And believe me in one word, the future is handcrafted. First, whatever you think in your brain, you work with the hand. The word handloom and handcraft is very synonymous with our culture. Though design has come, but what does this design means? According to me, the culture plus craft is design. So without culture, we did not produce anything which is crafted. It was a social need. But what happened to those needs now? And that is the question. And we cannot understand only by going to museum and not really observing properly somebody. In case of you want to see it, there are researchers, they're doing it, they'll be writing in book, but that's not good enough. Then why museum? If I cannot feel, if our craftsman cannot see, I've seen in Japan, every craftsman has a huge library of their craft. But here, you will not see even one book in one of the most important craftsman's house. They can't afford it. Government do not support it. They will give one of the biggest award and that's it. And that will not sustain our traditional textiles. And tradition is encyclopedia of everything. And that tradition and that writing, which is in the book, they have to practice, they have to understand, somebody has to coax them. Because even all the design schools in the country, they don't have this craftsmen's children, maybe they don't have any space for them, but they can't speak English. I was talking other day, why I'm talking this language? I was talking to a gentleman called Vijay Ange, somebody from Jorhat, who made green the country, made green the country. He has been awarded. Now he has been invited to Mexico to make Mexico green. And he says, I cannot talk in English, so one man always follows me. I cannot understand language. Our biggest problem, this is one of the, is also keeping the heritage of our green India. So we don't understand, we cannot talk in that language. So biggest problem for him is a language. Not only in a foreign language, but our own language. So this is the same way if you see some of this picture.
Can we go to the next page?
Change the slide in the order.
Yep.
Yeah. No, before that. So start from this poster. You can't change, I think.
Yeah.
Which says the future is handcrafted. I was fortunate not only to a big museum, but big industrial museum, in big industry museum, because Calico Museum was not made as just a museum. It was part of our study. As a designer, we used to go and study and come back, and we cannot weave them. Most of them are woven textiles or embroidered textiles. We cannot produce in the mill. In fact, just after independence, this happened. Government of India stopped mill to weave certain amount of width of border, certain width of pallu. Of course, afterwards, it has also been removed, that you cannot weave jacquard in the mill sector. God save, otherwise you would have lost that also. If you want a really good sarees, why I'm talking sarees? Because our maximum amount a woman needs almost 10 meters of fabric. If you say 6 meters or 5.5 meters of sari, then you have a petticoat, the textiles. Then you have a blouse, all this put together nearly approximately 10 meters. With that need, textile was next to agriculture, the largest industry. But what is the dasha of that industry? I cannot forget what I used to see 55 years back, when I came to Ahmedabad to work as a trainee in Calico Mills. Slowly, my training started from the mill itself to museum. I was in governing council from 74 till the Calico closed down. Mill got shifted somewhere else. Of course, it's for better, not for worse. It's very important that it should be preserved. It should not be auctioned away. Now, what happened with that learning? In the morning, I used to be in industrial area. In the evening, I used to be in Calico Museum. So my role changed. I started learning more of a craft sector than the mill sector, which I already understood, because this is working with the machine. But these are all with passion and with the culture, which our need of that particular society. Now here, change it to another, next Vijay.
Next slide, Vijay.
Next slide, please, Vijay. I got a chance to work with SEWA. You all know SEWA, Self-Employed Women's Association. They invited me not to do a museum, but because I was in textiles, so they asked me. So from packaging to museum, I finished almost every possible way. And that also allowed me, because I was also part of SABA, which is SAARC countries, 7 countries, together, it's called SABA. So I saw also their work, that Bhutan, Nepal, we brought them also here to demonstrate their work. But that demonstration just will not work. We have to retain that. How do we retain? Somebody told me yesterday that one of our great designers printed in the block printing design in digital printing. Can you imagine? You can do anything in digital. But is that what we are going to do? Is that what we are learning in our school? And one of the biggest problems has happened in our design schools. Because I think we look down. In fact, when I was a student in 1968 in NID, we have never gone to the museum. There was no question. It is only my teacher, who was from Finland, who really coaxed us to do craft documentation, but not my group. So what is the curriculum really? Now it's happening, but how many goes to the museum? What will you do in the museum? You will just see and come back. So this has to be thought about by policy level, which I think Dr. Koshi is one of the person in that committee that who can really change. And he has changed. I've seen in my school what he has done. I looked at him So I was not part of any of this committee or anything of NID, but I used to go and see what he's doing. And that's why it is still sustaining what we started. He gave a due respect to the people who really brought up this thing. And that is important. And I think we don't respect our craftsmen. We don't respect our craft. So what are we talking about heritage? What heritage? How do we do that? Is that museum's solution to it? Yeah, it is good to see it. But how do you learn that? How do you exercise? How do you take your craftsmen there and show them this is what it is? And once you have put it in the 2D, it's all gone. You don't see backside. You don't see front side properly. You just see flat fabric. That's it. Now, the point is by doing that, as I was in Calico Museum, helping with my mentor and a mother, Giraben, and I understood what is needed. Maybe if I get a chance, and that chance I got while doing this Seva Museum. It's 4 days work. Nothing was there. It's just a barren building. And we have 4 people. We are just 4 people, one craftsman with me who taught me a craft, the craftsman's work in the sense that he was he was everything. He was, not only carpenter, he was everything on that.
Can we go to the next slide, Vijay?
And this is one of the communities called Ahir. Go to next.
Yeah.
And this is in the museum itself is displayed. Next. Vijay, next.
Can we change, Vijay?
Vijay, can you hear?
Yeah.
Now this is another, that is the Ahir community. This is Rabari community, left-hand side. Now, if you see this, you don't need any, in absence of guide, this has been put. Next slide, next. Vijay? Yeah. Now here everything in detail, including the motif. And one of the big fashion house, Anita Dungre had put 1 month or maybe more, I don't know, one designer sitting and writing down all the designs name, the cut and everything, and worked for a big fashion show, the Lakme Fashion Week. And they could come and see, anybody can come and see. We just see the picture, we don't know what flower it is, what motive it is, what product it is, what for it is. So this is just opposite side. Next, Vijay. And what we see generally when we go to the museum is small tag. But what is it? Who will talk? So we as a designer also has a responsibility to talk about our craft in detail, whether in a book they do, but you don't see the original. Then how do you smell the whole? How do you identify the whole thing? Next. You see, this again the same thing, the Rabari embroidery, then it has been made in 2 languages also. So this thing is needed. According to me as a designer, I could say there is a, one of the ways that you can educate people. You can tell them on their own they can learn. You don't have to do anything else. Next. Now, when you see also fabric like khadi, you don't know how transparent it is, how thin it is, because this kind of fabric which is woven and embroidered, you need both the sides to be seen, because most of the important detail is in the back side of the fabric. And this is another museum It's just one person's everyday wearing fabric, khadi saris. And I think 40, 50 saris she donated. And it is in one of the wooden havelis in old Ahmedabad. And we have put this that you can see from both the sides. And as a PVC which is covered, it doesn't touch the fabric. And these are all cotton. These are all cotton. That's why I was telling Dr. Koshi that this kind of simple priced, absolutely economical
Everyday
fabric,
wear. Yeah.
everyday wear, it is not being displayed. It is not being shown. And within a day, you can remove this whole museum. And this, even if you see the ground which was there, we have not touched. So this sensitivity, I'm not saying that I'm the only sensible person, but this is what I need to tell the community, in my community, the designers community, the craftsman community. Don't destroy anything. Try to embellish it. Try to use it. And here you can see both the side, if it is embroidered and most of the saris are woven or embroidered. So this is what I wanted to show you, that what should be, according to my mind, especially textile museum. This is not sculpture. This is not wood. This is not metal. This is not stone. There you need a lighting and putting it properly. But how do you put the saris? Or textiles, not saris only. There are so many things. But there are a lot of things it will not be possible, like a carpet. Even by talking to my people, my colleague or Giraben, to show the backside, little cut was done so you can see the backside little, but not the full thing. One knot somewhere it is changing, one color it is changing. And what is the intricacy? When you see, that Kashmir shawl, the Jamewa, my God, it's worse than, the computer, all those cables. So unless you see this, you cannot understand. And this is called Param, the one family going on for so many centuries. And this is what is important. And they should be able to see. They should be part of the museum. They should be part of the trust. Because if they don't have that, nowhere, even I have not seen in Kutch, there are small museum has come up. But I don't know, still I couldn't find it out, how many are textile museum in this country. Total museum is saying 800, but how many are textiles? And this is one of the largest.
I think you have raised a very important point, Subrata, that, the students need to really look at, what is it that you are seeing differently from a book when you go to a museum, and how those museum pieces should be displayed, especially in textiles, for actual better learning. And you also made a great differentiation between everyday textiles versus special occasion, wedding, or, events based things which are normally exhibited. But you need to also understand the everyday fabrics and celebrate it, because they are also coming from the great weaving traditions, whether it's Chanderi, whether it's handloom. Really great that you have brought this point. So can we now move on to Dr. Alka Pandey, with your permission?
Thank you very much.
Dr. Alkaji, it's such a great pleasure to have you. And after hearing Subrata's focus on the museums, and you have curated number of exhibitions over the years. But how do you see the art influencing textiles and textiles influencing art? And how do you think that we can leverage this to the current world, which is actually going digital and really getting alienated? So maybe that you can throw some light through your presentation, Dr. Alka Pandey.
Am I unmuted? Can you all hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you, please.
Okay. So I want to begin by thanking you, Dr. Koshi, for putting such a wonderful patchwork of people together and bringing us all under one umbrella and getting different voices to speak on textile traditions. It's really wonderful the way you brought in the interdisciplinary variant. That's a very politically correct word these days, variant, into this program. You have people from textile artists to art historians to designers talking all about, uh, you know, how textiles have evolved, are evolving, and what is their future, and how do all our different trajectories build and enrich the fabric. So I'm going to speak from the point of view of a cultural historian, and I'm going to talk about what it is to mean the fabric of art. There are other people who will be talking about textiles, materiality, the whole philosophy, the phenomenology of it all. But I'd like to just talk about the fact that how we see textiles through the lens of Indian art. And we see that the first physical representation is seen in the red mail. Actually, I want to use the screen, Dr. Yadav. So if you let me share the screen, I'll be able to handle it better.
Okay.
I can share my screen myself. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the fact that we see textiles right from the time of the Indus Valley civilization, where we see a red, where we see the male torso wearing a textile, and he's wearing a shawl which has a trefoil design on his shawl. So what you see here, I don't know what has happened. Why is this thing coming? Just bear with me for a minute. Technology. Um, screen. So I want to just talk of the fact that how textiles have always been part of the Indian cultural history, and we see them from the Indus Valley civilization. We see them in the Ajanta murals. We hear about them in the time of the Rigveda. We have a lot of literary evidences. We also have a lot of mythological evidences. We know of the famous courtesan Amrapali from Vaishali when she goes to meet Gautam Buddha. She apparently wore a richly woven semi-transparent sari, which was woven by the pre-modern weaver. In the Ramayana, which was written in the Treta Yuga, we see that in the 4th century before the Common Era, there is a comparison of the kind of clothing which was worn by the elitist class and more by the working class. What we also see is that there are enough visual material in the uh, temple sculptures, in the wall murals of the Lipakshi temple, in Kalamkari. We see a lot of text motifs which were represented by weavers, and you have also the great weaver Kabir, the Tana Bana. You have all kinds of literary evidences to show the great weaving tradition in India. There are certain motifs which I want to talk about, where there is an interchangeability between fine art practice, between sculpture, between um, painting, and we see the kalpa vriksha which is shown. We see the mango, the keri, the paisley motifs which are seen. I'm going to talk of from the point of view of the Samudra Manthan, where the Navratans came out, where the Airavat came out, the white elephant, where the Pegasus, I mean the Ushtra, Ugra Shavasa came out, the horse with the wings. We have the camel, the fish motif, the parrot, the myna, and of course, we have the lotus, which is very, very synonymous in both Buddhism and Hinduism. You have Kamalanayana, Rama. You have the lotus as a symbol of purity in Buddhism. And then, of course, you have the sacred symbols like the Shankha, Chakra, Rudraksha, Charan, Swastika, Kesha, all these.
Dr. Alka, your slides are not visible.
No, I don't know. I had my thing open. Just a minute.
Oh, Dr. Vijay can do that, if you want. Yeah.
1 minute. Let me just see because I had my slide.
People are asking for it. That's why I just interrupted you. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I want to just open my slides. Just 1 second.
Or Vijay can help you if you want.
Okay, he can bring the slides
Yeah.
back, but
Yeah.
yeah, okay, but I need, yeah, 1 minute. I've got my slides open. Yeah, 1 minute. I'm just going to put them on and I'm going to start showing the slides.
Right.
What happened? Very strange. One fabric part. Just bear with me just for 1 minute, otherwise I'll go back to Vijay. I have it here on my desktop because I feel I have a better control showing them. If it opens, fine.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay. So now I will go on. It's the whole thing. So I'm beginning here with the priest, the trefoil design, if you can see on his shawl in the Indus Valley.
No, it's not visible.
It is not visible yet. No.
Not visible? I can see that. 1 minute.
Let Vijay put it,
Can you not see it?
No.
1 minute. 1 minute. Is it not showing? Okay, Vijay, put it up. Though it should be showing on my.
I'm just doing it.
It should be showing. I have it here on my screen. Why is it not sharing? Anyway, let me not.
Visible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now this is. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see now.
So this is the priest, the Indus Valley priest, with his semi-closed eyes in meditation, with wearing a kind of a sanghati, with the trefoil design, as you can see. And these kind of designs are deeply replicated by weavers and designers. This is the Ajanta painting, the Mahajanaka Jatak, from the 1st century of the Common Era. And if you see the transparent drapes on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, you see women wearing beautiful draperies, the way they've draped their attire. And you can see some kind of block printing or woven designs of the fabric they are wearing, plus the very elaborate hairdos. I'm going to quickly rush off to the much later medieval period, where you see in the clothing of the Mughal period, you see patterns, you see embroideries, you see block patterns, and you see the finest of muslins which have been woven in this period. And you can also see some kind of clothing and attire which is worn by the women. In the pre-modern India, it was all draped. There were no stitched garments in India. But we first see our stitched garment in the 2nd century of the before the Common Era, in the Kushan period, where you see a headless figure with boots and a stitched coat. Later, we see with the coming in of the Islamic or the Indo-Arabs, you start seeing the fitted and more structured clothing which comes into India. But what the great thing about India is, we're a country of great assimilations, and we assimilate a lot of stuff and bring it and weave it into our indigenous traditions. Here is another image I'm showing of from the Akbar period, who hands his imperial crown to Shah Jahan. This is a painting by Bichitta, and you can see the details of the carpet with the floral motifs in this particular painting. Look at the tent which is there. Look at the fabric of the tent. Look at the prints on the tent, and you can look at the details of the woven carpet above which Akbar is sitting. This is a painting from the Lipakshi temple in Andhra Pradesh. And, you will see a very close relationship with the Kalamkari traditions, which come from Andhra itself, but they come from the town of Srikalahasti. And you will see a great kind of detailing, Kalamkari, made of the Kalam. So there's a fine line drawing which comes in, and I will show you those fabric later. Here is a more details from another painting from the Lipakshi temple, where you see the clothing, the style of draping of the sari. You see the upper part of the body is bare, but there is no commodification. The gaze is deeply spiritual. The women are quite empowered, and you see the clothing that they are wearing. So it could be block printed, it could be embroidered, it could be woven. Now, here is a beautiful kalamkari painting on cloth, and here is the beautiful, the iconic scene of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna on the field of Kurukshetra is instructing Arjun to work with detachment. Now, this is a beautiful image. It's more two-dimensional, but if you see the use of madder red, so the medieval Indians also knew a lot about pigments, the use, and madder was very, very popular. And you also see the lamp black, which they are using to outline this beautiful textile art. Now, palampores, which you see in the coast of Coromandel, these were made, this is very much part of our colonial history. They were made for the Sri Lankan market. They were also sold. This is a reversal happening, going from India. This is much before the arts and crafts movement, and these beautiful palampores going from the Coromandel coast back, going to the markets, to the very, very upper echelons, economic markets of the UK, who were our colonial masters at that time. Now, if you look at this, beautiful palampores with peacock designs, again from the Coromandel coast, the way the work has been done, and you can see this kind of very Rococo busy style, which you see in the Hoysala temple architecture as well. Now, this is another beautiful kalamkari, a cotton cover depicting a turkey, exotic birds and flowers from Western India in the early part of the 17th century. Now, this shows you a great amount of cross-cultural dialogue which was happening in India, just to show that, we are talking of cultural studies in a theoretical discourse now, which is coming from the West. Now, I am a born-again Indian, and having studied done my postdoctoral in goldsmiths, I have now come back to Indian aesthetics, to Indian culture, Indian heritage, and doing a lot of retellings and a rereading of it. And I go back to the part of the 17th century where you see already a great amount of cross-cultural dialogue happening through a visual language, through textiles. Now, this is an image of Kantha from West Bengal, from Eastern India. And now if you look at the compositions, the central figure is more like a 1,000-petaled lotus. So where does this come from? Obviously, this comes from the sculptures which were there much before, many hundreds of years before. The style of painting, which can be both circular, linear, and upside down, it also shows you the travel of time. Because in India, the concept of time was never linear. It was always very, very circular. And here we come to the philosophy of Mahakal, of Shiva. Now, I'm again going backward. This is, as Dr. Koshi had talked of the fabric map of India. I'm trying to do a certain mapping of India in a very random way. I'm trying to do it almost like a musical mode of the Ragamalika, just taking fabric from different states. We've got 29 states, and if you just string the states together in a Ragamalika, you find a beautiful orchestra of textile weaves, embroideries happening. Here is a chikankari embroidery, which is on a sari, and the paisley and the mango and the keri, they all come together in this image. And with it also comes the shadow work and the shadow play, which came from Central Asia. So you see a lot of amalgamation. It can be local hands, imported ideas, a very holistic kind of, composition, which is happening in this particular chikankari from Lucknow in the early part of the 19th century. I think I don't really need to explain too much of this, because Subrata ji has already explained the ahir and the rabadi and embroideries. And here we see an indigenous woman sewing traditional embroidered clothes. And it is very much part of the living culture today. It is still happening, though it's languishing, but it was also part of income generation and skill development. This is, of course, block printing, which was very much older. I'll quickly run through it.
No. I'm asking Vijay to turn it here. Yeah.
I'll just quickly do. Of course, the Kalpavriksha, the tree of life, which came out of the Samudra Manthan, and you see innumerable times how the tree of life has been represented in uh, by various artists, weavers, artists, etc. I just want to end with a little paragraph, which I'm going to read from my book, Flower Power, where I say that how the motif, and I want to go to the motif only of the flower, has been a source of inspiration for textile patterns since the dawn of civilization in India. The floral motifs on the costume of the red male torso from the Indus Valley civilization show a visible, refined version of the jasmine. Numerous Ajanta murals depict people wearing delicate garments with lotus patterns. Over the centuries, a rich tradition of using floral designs in textiles has evolved in various forms all over the country. Among different styles are the kalamkari and the ikat traditions of Andhra Pradesh, the paitani weaves of the Deccan, the embroidered shawls of Kashmir, the patolas of Gujarat, fulkari of Punjab, the kantha and jamdani of Bengal, and chamba rumals or handkerchiefs of present-day Himachal Pradesh, as well as pictorial shawls that have worked images of birds, animals, flowers, plants, landscapes, and other natural wonders that can be found across the length and breadth of the subcontinent. So this is just the introduction to my chapter on the fabric of art in the book Flower Shower, where I have explained that how the Indian flowers, also the flowers which were imported into the country, have been seen in various aspects of art, whether it's sculpture, painting, um, and of course, textiles. So I'd just like to end by saying that even if you take the motif of just the rose or just the lotus, which is so indigenous to the country, you can see a whole world unfolding in the world of India.
And the mango, the ambi.
And the mango, the curry,
Yeah.
the paisley. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Unbelievable. Dr. Alkapande, I think you used the word correctly, Raga Maliga. It is like a musical orchestra of, design and traditions mixed so beautifully that, it will be a great lesson for all the design students and the connoisseurs also to relive the beautiful traditions of Indian fabrics and the diversity of this great country and the great textile traditions, every nook and corner. Something or other is happening in terms of an embellishment, in terms of an embroidery, in terms of block printing, in terms of vegetable dyes, in terms of using a particular kind of like the Chanderi fabrics or the Balramapuram weaves or the Kasargod saris. One friend of mine, when he collected the number of saris, there are some 116 types of saris in Indian textiles, so it just goes on and on. This is such a beautiful presentation. We are so ever grateful, Dr. Alkapande, for this. Everybody should probably see these two books, Masterpiece of Indian Art and Flower Shower, as an important reading for us to understand the work on which she is building on to talk to us today. Now we go to Professor Archana Shastri. Her work in Mekong Ganga Asian Textile Traditional Museum I have referred to. But more importantly, I feel the context of Indian textiles in the Southeast Asian cluster of the 6-7 countries is something which we miss out. We don't really see how these are connected, how these are dissimilar and similar in some ways. And that is something which, we can learn from Professor Archana Shastri today. If she gets the time to really take us through that area. So now I invite Professor Archana Shastri to give her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Koshi, for this privilege. I show a few slides. It's a very brief presentation. And the idea is to reflect the seamless interface of myth, reality, and representation through the documentation done in Cambodia in the past 3 years. Now, it was as early as the 3rd century AD that Hinduism and Buddhism arrived in Southeast Asia, along with traders, priests, and monks. New ideas and concepts were integrated with their existing belief systems, which had to do with animism and ancestor worship. Now, given to a shared monsoon culture and amphibian lifestyle, that is half on land and half on water, you see the man on the left, sort of gently swaying in his hammock when on land, and in the boat when on water. And you can see the vagaries of nature, which kind of informs, their close connection with the land, fertility and fecundity of the land associated with water. So certain myths, which perhaps went from India, were assimilated and became an innate part of their culture. So you see that on the right-hand side, there is a performance of the Samudra Manthan, the myth of creation. And on the left lower half is a whole textile. Whole is the Cambodian word for ikat. And you can see the two dragons. You see the tree motif in the center. And what they celebrate is what they call the Tri-Fum, which is the three-world mythology, which was associated with Theravada Buddhism, in which clear-cut demarcations and associations, symbolic associations of the Naga with the water, the tree with the land, and the hong or the bird with the sky. And the Sumeru becomes the leitmotif, where the gods reside, and the ultimate kind of, worship of Sumeru. Next, can we have the next slide, please? Now, the earliest recorded reference to the process of Indianization in Cambodia is found with this is again 3rd century AD, with the marriage of Hindu prince Kondinya with the Naga princess Soma. Now, till date, this ceremony is actually rehearsed with the bride leading the groom to the nuptial chambers after the marriage is solemnized. You see it on the lower half. And the legend records the presentation of clothing by the prince to the princess, and the father of the princess swallowing the waters to bequeath the kingdom to the couple, and thus underline the implied union of the solar and lunar dynasties. Inheritance continues to be matrilineal, and with the groom shifting to live with the bride in the traditional Cambodian setup. Now, this slide actually shows the process of Indianization, which introduced several syncretic elements, which found the coexistence of Hindu epics, Buddhist stories, Indian gods and iconography, Sanskrit and Pali language, the concept of Chakravartin or Devaraja, social hierarchies, astronomy, musical instruments, etc., etc. Now, the earliest cult of Shiva as a mountain deity is identified as early as 5th century AD in Cambodia. Introduced thereafter, I mean, not only in Cambodia, but the rest of Southeast Asia, was a systematic, irrigation, building of reservoirs, and also wet rice cultivation. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So on the extreme left on the top, you see what they call is Nyekta. And Nyekta is, could be associated with a tree, with a region, with a particular person, or with the, certain kind of community. And he's associated with ancestor worship. On the right side, you see what could be, they call Maha Isai. It could be a word for Maharishi. It's very difficult because they have lost all their, scriptures, and it's very difficult. A lot of them, the monks got killed during the Khmer Rouge time. So it's very, very difficult to get down to the basis of it. And so you have the Pashupati or the Mahaishi on the right-hand side. You have, the images which are associated with Vishnu. And Harihara was sort of in a big way kind of worshipped. And Buddhism, both the Mahayana, Hinayana, and much later, the Theravada Buddhism came is followed largely by the society there. And it's very interesting because, I mean, Alkaji was just talking about the sort of the various kind of canopies and awnings which he showed, with the lotus at the center of it. And you see here in the Buddhist imagery where the chhatra, that is the umbrella or the parasol, you know, the lotus, and what they call is the pidan, which would be the Indian kind of mandapa. The word is also vitan, which means ceiling, you know. And all three are combined, and it is sort of a ritualistic textile, which also is made in whole, that is ikat, showing various stories of jatakas. And this is to kind of make sacred the space. A lot of Indian early temples are actually shown, you know, sort of, they show signs that a canopy was put, you know, so they have kind of wooden hooks on all four sides and sometimes in the center as well. You have in the center lower half is what they call a prayer bot or a prabot, which is actually a ritualistic painting on cloth and initially hung in the pagodas, later on painted on the pagodas, and some of them are actually made in the are loaned to people, you know, to their houses as and when, you know, ceremonies are offered. Next. Okay, so now all across South Asia, royal power was associated with mobilizing people to grow rice rather than controlling land. The place was sparsely kind of, especially Cambodia, was sparsely populated. And they could, these people could also be called upon to fight as well as construct monuments. Till date, land is not owned by the people there. And the first dated inscription in Khmer were found as early as 611 AD. And 2 years later, you have the kind of poetic sort of poetic Sanskrit, which kind of praised the actions of the kings and the elites for sponsoring temples, monasteries, for winning wars, and gifts to the Brahmins and the monks. This in addition to providing protection from wars and effective control of natural forces. I mean, water, both, you know, the deluge and drought was a living reality for them. Now, the temples themselves were built, creating the impression of Mount Meru. I mean, you see Angkor Wat, 12th century, where the gods resided and was surrounded by the mythical ocean. On the right-hand side, you see a child's version of it, you know, just kind of created in sand, just for play. And these monuments also served as tombs where the ashes of the kings were kept. They reflected the king's devotion to a particular deity. In this case of Angkor Wat, Suryavarman II worshipped Vishnu, and it served as a temple, it served as a tomb, and in this case, it also served as an observatory. In the lower half, it's very interesting where you see the kalamkari sort of sari was, you know, procured by me last year. And you can see on the left and extreme left-hand side, a similar kind of rendering of the birds. Interestingly enough, you see the Thais took over and they formulated, just like our Silpa Shastra, what they call is the kabak, which gave the basic sort of elements and fundamentals of, you know, sort of visualizing patterns. And so there is a slight kind of deviation, but it is almost the same if you compare the birds. On the right-hand side, again, you see the intersecting circles, which are again inscribed, are found in the sort of, in Angkor Wat. And it is very interesting that you see the earliest recorded reference to lifestyle and textiles in Cambodia comes from a Chinese emissary in 12th century, 1296 to 97. He's known as Chao Ta Kwa, who talks about the life there. And he mentions that, you see, the Cambodians were not very well versed with textile production. that they wove on backstrap loom, and the most, the narrowest strip which they could weave was about 30 centimeters. Can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So we'll come back to it later. Now, inscribed on the temple doorway at Angkor in 10th century CE is also the implied union of the solar and lunar dynasties and the legend of Shiva. It is associated with the legend of Shiva, gifting a celestial Apsara by the name Mera to a sage, wise sage called Kambu. And thus creating between Mera and Kambu was created Kambuja, born of Kambu or Kampuchya. Now the Apsaras are not only the model of femininity and fecundity, for the Cambodians, but also patrons of dance. They're essential as perpetuators of Khmer culture and are sort of carved in company of varied Brahminic gods and goddesses. Now, many of the Khmer inscriptions actually list dancers and musicians which were donated to serve the temples and continue, and the Apsara dance per se, or for that matter, any kind of classical dance form continues to be sort of a devotional form of expression at temples, Buddhist monasteries, or also to the Nyekta, for ancestor worship, or even to a tree. And on the left-hand side, you see Riemkar, which is a form of Ramayana. Now, after the sack of Angkor Wat in mid sort of 15th century, 14 something, you see a lot of these dancers, a lot of skilled craftsmen were taken away by the Thais, and thereafter, a lot of the sort of culture actually thrived in the Thai courts. So on the left-hand side, you see the Riemkar, the Rama Epic, which is being performed. And the Rama Epic in the Southeast Asian countries is unlike our Ramayana. And again, very, very associated, with the releasing of the fertilizing waters. So the theme undergoes a radical change. Again, in the middle is a hole, a traditional kind of a textile. The traditional Cambodian textile uses a twill weave and a weft kind of a ikat, where you see the apsaras. Next. Yeah. So when we look at the costumes also, there is a direct reference on the left-hand side. This is Pierre Riem, that is Lord Ram. And the depiction is 6th century AD. So a lot of sort of sculptures and a lot of iconography was transported, down Southeast Asia. And you see on the lower half, which is from Bayonne, you see a very cursory kind of, sort of langot kind of a garment, which was worn by the locals. There's a cockfight which is happening there. And in many of these sort of villages, the dhoti, continues to be worn both by the men as well as the women. Now it is referred to samput chokban. Samput is basically any piece of fabric, and chokban is a bundle, a knot tied at the waist, and the middle portion, two end pieces tucked in. Now this remains the sort of worn, continues to be worn by the priest, whom they call the acharyas. And the krama which she's wearing on her head, and the krama which the checked angocha which the man is wearing below, is a quintessential kind of garment associated with Cambodia, though they don't really like to acknowledge it. But it is a multi-dimensional kind of multi-usable fabric. You can use it for the headgear, you can use it, as a sash, you can use it as a lower garment. And they have documented over 50 plus uses of the krama. And the krama now, of course, is in the market in variety of checks, in variety of patterns, and, is sold to the tourists. On the right-hand side, you see, extreme right, you have what you call the skirt-like, garment, hip wrapper for the woman. known by various names, and it was tied with a knot, and then it was called somaloy. Here you can see the actual kind of cascading effect in the front. So you have a whole variety in these, and this was also worn by the men. And lower half you see the women, which are the peasant women, wearing this so-called wrapped around skirt, which with the blouse came in after Cambodia becomes the French protectorate. And of course, the more fashionable women now wear it with a peplum, and they wear it with, in all kinds of lacy textile. And on the right hand lower half, you see, if you see most of the Angkorian sort of sculptures, you don't see the women wearing anything on top. So this sabai, the upper garment, actually was introduced again at a later date, and the blouse with the coming of the French. Next. In the middle, in the middle half, those women were wearing the samput chokban, which was in the traditional Cambodian whole fabric. And this was a kind of a processional ritual procession, which was taken out from one of the pagodas. Next. Yeah. Now, this is again, you see.
You will be able to wrap up in the next 2-3 minutes?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay,
yeah. So here you have, you see it's an ordination ceremony, and you see Prince Siddhartha, which is, you see the initiate dressed as a Prince Siddhartha, and it, sort of the whole ceremony deals with the enactment of renunciation and initiation. There is a display with great pomp and show of ritual banners and paraphernalia, and exchange and offerings of textiles amongst the other. And the pagodas with their elaborate murals provide an ideal and evocative environment, recalling the Jatakas. On the extreme left-hand side, you see the gesture is also kind of part and parcel of the fabric, which was, the Sarasa fabric, which was exported to Thailand. Now, essentially, there are only two basic points which I have focused on. One, that the traditional textiles, for that matter, any handmade product cannot be viewed in isolation from their larger cultural context or their transactional efficacy. And given the materiality, the processes, or the specialized skill and its aesthetic manifestation, all cultural products are inherently an integrated expression of art, craft, and design. And this calls for a multidimensional and multidisciplinary discourse and approach. The second point, I'll make it short, is with the reference to the cultural interactions, interventions, and exchanges between India and Southeast Asia. The process of Indianization was neither coercive nor colonizing. Shared across the region simultaneously were Chinese and Islamic influences, followed by the European colonization. However, the Indian remnants remained deeply instituted, assimilated, and absorbed, and sometimes beyond recognition. Of greater importance is how much do we care for this bequeathed heritage. If we do, we should then reclaim it by holding more discourses, generating more research and visibility, both within as well as outside India. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Archana Shastri. You have placed it in a context which some of us are not even aware of, in terms of its roots and how you can actually rediscover the heritage. Since two of our panelists would be leaving at 6 o'clock, who have already finished their presentation, I would like to say the story so far. We started by telling about the Susman and the Kanjivaram stories, by telling that actually the weavers and the people, karigars who make these beautiful textiles cannot even afford to buy their own child's marriage, the same sari. So it is a tragedy of our country in terms of protecting and nurturing the weavers and the traditional craftsmen. And then we went on to Subrata Bhaumik's beautiful presentation about what actually the current generation should look at museums, how they should look at museum, what's actually the difference between a book and a museum, for example. why is it that museums are not becoming part of our studies and research, and more experiencing those fabrics from both sides. He went on re-emphasizing the need to understand the fabrics, not only the special fabrics and special occasion fabrics, but also the everyday fabrics. How do you discover, like the chins or the khadi or the various other interpretations which we see in our country. Then when we went on to Dr. Alka Pandey's Ragamalika of the beautiful traditional textiles of India, she showed us some spectacular examples and showed us how India has used its flora and fauna, the fruits and vegetables, and the birds, and how these motifs have got into the textile traditions and icons of India. And we then went on to Professor Archana Shastri to understand the international context. We talk about Northeast and Southeast Asia, etc., in a grouping and forget that is all people. And textiles touch the body of the people. Fashion is all about context and time, and how it changes, and how we are part of a common heritage. She was able to bring it brilliantly to show how our epics have played a role in influencing some of these traditions and fabrics. So it has been a great journey we have taken so far. And the story going forward, we are going to present Professor Vandana Bhandari, while we thank Subrata and Dr. Alka Pandey. If they want to leave at 6 p.m., it's fine. And we then move on to Professor Vandana Bhandari. Now we shift a bit the focus to design schools, and how the design schools, are they just wanting to teach the skills and knowledge to students, or are they going to influence the material culture of the country itself? Like Bauhaus and Ulm and Domus Academy said that they are not just design schools, but they are actually influencing culture, the material culture of the country itself. So we now present Professor Vandana Bhandari.
Thank you so much, Dr. Koshi. Been such a pleasure to listen to all the wonderful speakers before me, and greetings to all of you who've joined. Now, in the morning, I was just sitting and thinking that I have to do this presentation, and looking at my phone for inspiration. And I looked at, I was on my Instagram, and I came across this beautiful post by Dia Mirza, who says, and I'm going to read this: "Have you ever witnessed our master craftsmen women at work? It is easily one of the most spellbinding processes. The precision and fluidity with which those hands and feet move, so perfectly synchronized with the rhythm of the loom, creating poetry in motion. These craft forms are ours to celebrate every day." Dia Mirza has 4.6 million followers. These are the people we need if we want to. We hope that we can move handlooms to the next generation. And that is the main point that I want to make in this conversation. While we all love our handlooms, while we all love our artisans, while we all love our culture, it is not going to move forward unless it is designed so that, as Dr. Koshi rightly pointed out, it is relevant to the context today. And it has to be relevant today, and it has to be relevant tomorrow, and only then it will move into the future. So if one wants to read more theory of handlooms and textiles, I have published several books, and please do look at that. But I'm going to talk a little bit in the abstract. As we know, handlooms and handicrafts in India have always flourished under patronage. Whether it was royal patronage, whether it was trader patronage, they flourished under that. And at the time of the British rule in India and the Industrial Revolution in England, this balance was somewhat disturbed. Once we got our independence, the government and some individuals in particular, like Pupil Jaikar, Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, they started to steer the work for revival of these products, not only handlooms, but also handicrafts. The sari, the dhoti, the turban, and many of these unstitched garments have come to us from ancient to present times. And these are garments which come off the loom. As Watson says, these are ready to wear garments. And in India, in fact, if you were to cut a piece of garment, it was considered to be sacrilege. It was considered to be spoiling the fabric of life. And people did not, that is why even today in weddings, at rituals related to death, rituals related to religious ceremonies, people continue to wear the unstitched garment. A little bit more about how the sari has moved in India. As we know, it is a unstitched length of fabric, which has a rich and diverse tradition of color, pattern, and weave. And most of these design elements have been inspired by regional traditions. And of course, depending on what was happening in that region, the motives, etc., as Dr. Pandey very beautifully expressed, those were shown in the saris. And these simple rectangular forms started to have an evolving style because of the modifications in the drape and the ornamentation. And they acquired an identity and form depending on the regional style of draping. Now, the sari was traditionally, of course, woven on the handloom because only the handloom existed. And later it started to be made on the power loom also. But a sari is a sari if it has a specific design structure. And the rectangular piece of cloth is divided into 3 distinct parts: the main body of the sari, the end piece, and the borders. By the 90s in India, we found that the handloom sari started to be considered a piece of tradition which was worn by women who were not fashionable. Georgette and crepe saris with very glittery embellishments started to be worn by the so-called fashionable people.
Is it bling?
The bling, absolutely. And I come from a good old Marwari family, and when I would wear a Banarsi sari to a family wedding, people would say, this poor woman, she has no fashion sense. But there was hope for us, and we were not always to remain fuddy-duddies. And I always tell one of my leading designers, one of the leading designers in the country who's been my student, Sabyasachi, that thanks to you, we came back in fashion. Because at that point of time, the fashion world found new patrons. Our handlooms found new patrons. And these were the designers. And these designers were so influential that they started to change the mindsets of people. Not only change the mindsets, also as fashion evolves, people's mindsets themselves keep on evolving. And that, that brought about, I thought, a new interest in the handlooms. So over the years, leading fashion designers developed an empathy with the sari and the handlooms and brought them back in vogue. The Indian fashion stage today, therefore, illustrates the nationwide growth of handmade textiles. And I do feel that institutes such as NIFT have had a great role in bringing the handloom and handicrafts back into the fore, because they brought these back in fashion. They talked about it, they produced it, our alumni created it, and it was in the market. And they were so beautiful, they were so new, they were so rich that people wanted to wear them. Not only our own designers, when we look at business models across the world for iconic fashion businesses, we find that reviving history and heritage, whether it is a brand like Burberry, or it is a brand like Sabyasachi, or it is a brand like Raw Mango, it has been about revival, about authenticity, about respect for your heritage. And these are the brands which have survived. And I think going forward, these are the brands which are really going to do well in the world. And we can see that, I think, an event like the COVID has just pushed it along, but we were already there. We were moving in that direction. So designers such as Vidhi Singhania, who revived the Kota saris, and I'm just naming a few, not to say that many more people haven't done work in this direction. Sanjay Garg's understanding of skills, markets, innovations, they saw him initiate a range of brightly colored Chanderi saris and his bird motif, which became so popular in local handicrafts markets. And he started his journey in the early 2000s, and his first collection was on Chanderi saris. From there, his collaboration with Chanderi and his love for handmade later moved into weavers in Varanasi and Bengal, and also led to the revival of Mashru saris, the Mashru fabric, which, we think that it was just made in Gujarat, but Sanjay assures me that it was made in Banaras, and he's working with weavers who are reviving this. Other designers like Anavila Mishra, who worked in the Fulia region of West Bengal, who traditionally worked with cotton and then later started to work with other fibers. And then she created very unique linen saris, which became all a rage across the country and also across the world. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about Sabyasachi, because I think there is one single person who has made the largest impact in the fashion business has been him. He really believes that as a leading designer, his role has been to create and sustain craft at the highest level. And automatically, once he does that, a trickle-down effect will follow. The designers create awareness and a market for craft. Business craft sustains when these people create a demand. And to quote him, he says, "I'm not India's most talented or creative designer, but I'm India's most influential and powerful commercial designer." And in one of his talks, he said, "I'm also the most copied designer in the world." So if he's to create a Banarsi sari, everybody wants to create a Banarsi sari. And yes, some people will go to the power loom, but many will go to the handloom also, and many more saris will be produced. So in my view, Sabyasachi, he owes his success to a combination of brilliant marketing tactics, patronage of Indian craft, capturing the imagination of key fashion media with his evocative shows, and a discreetly publicized friendship with Indian fashion's largest influencers, which is, of course, Bollywood. No other dress personifies India as does the sari, he says. A rectangular piece of cloth which drapes sensuously around the upper and lower part of the woman body, it embodies tradition. And Sabyasachi recognizes that. And in recent times, his brand has been recognized for the sari. And, initially he started with more embroidered saris and, with the georgettes being embroidered. And then later he started to move more to the traditional saris. So I think I really believe that Indian designers who are working with handlooms can change the way in which the world looks at them. Due to the focus of preserving these skills and upholding innovation in the design process, there has been an increasing usage of such traditional methods by designers across all levels. So when the couturiers produce something, then the other designers tend to follow suit. Indian design is making rapid strides, and the customer is demanding newness. This is something very important. So there's no point in saying that change is not going to happen. Handlooms have always evolved. Textiles have always evolved. That's why we have, movement across so many centuries. That's why the Mughal booty became popular, and that's why different dyes became popular at different points of time. So they have never been static. And this is it's important for practitioners to recognize that and say that we have to change with the times, otherwise things will die. And many people talked about assimilating culture and helping it to move forward. And that's what this is about. So designers today are rising to the challenge of the customer's demand for newness, and they create exquisite and unexpected combinations of technical know-hows, colors, and textures. So the chanderi, which was always produced on a white with a gold, Sanjay Garg started to produce it in acid greens and in shocking pinks and the bright yellows, and how popular the chanderis became. So I also observe, when you see designers and when you work with them, that people who are working with crafts currently are actually growing their business. This could just be a wider global trend for handmade and sustainable goods, but also an appreciation of the uniqueness that the hand can bring to a fashion item. And of course, I think slow fashion and sustainability is the way to go forward in fashion. And I'll stop here. If anybody has questions, I'll be happy to answer them later.
Thank you, Professor Vandana Bhandari. What a strong advocacy for Indian traditional handlooms and saris in particular. And also you have already said the answers to whether the, design schools like NIFS are really influencing the material culture around us. And what a positive, positive strength to that your voice and the advocacy for handlooms and handicrafts to rediscover itself with the changing context and times. Thank you so much. I am so inspired after listening to you.
Thank you.
So now we move to looking at this process of a designer, a craft artist or a craft designer, textile designer or an artist craftsman, whatever you want to call it. Gopika embodies that particular genre of people, and her consistent explorations have been very, very inspiring to. I see her even doodle classes are sold out in no time. So we are very happy to present Gopika Nath, who will take you through the process which a designer undergoes and what is the process about and what is the category all about.
Thank you, Dr. Koshi, for this opportunity to be here and to listen to some very, very erudite speakers. I'm going to actually take forward what Vandana has said, but in a little more detailed way. The focus of my talk will be upon handcrafting and what it means to work with the hands. And so before I begin the slides, we can keep that. We don't want to use the slides just yet. When we dwell upon our textile heritage, one must remember it is not just a skill or fabric we worn, but has been part of India's socio-cultural ethos from as far back as the time of the Vedas. These ancients, who envisaged sacrifice as the origin of the earth and the people in it, liken this with that of weaving cloth, where the man stretches the warp and draws the weft, and they conclude that hymn with they made the melodies into the shuttles for weaving. This is probably one of the reasons that textiles have deep spiritual significance, leading to the fastidious and meticulous detailing, which to my mind can only be a labor of love, especially given the wages that craftsmen earn today. Many venerated saint poets were associated with textiles and drew philosophical meaning from their trade. Arka mentioned Kabir, and he is the weaver saint, is obviously an obvious example. But there is Namdev, who is the guru of block printers who call themselves Namdev Banshis. These and other sages use cloth and its making techniques as analogies for spiritual wisdom. With Bulle Shah, the Sufi mystic, referring to the oneness of being as one thread only. 1,000 hanks and skeins with 10,000 names, but there is one thread only. Further, Jaslin Thameja adds to this, saying that the deep connection between cloth and our inner consciousness is not explicit, it is implicit. For textiles are a form of non-verbal language, conveying much about the creator and for whom it is created. Fiber and texture can reveal geoclimatic conditions, with motifs communicating origins, cultural history, and beliefs, including status of the wearer and the ethnic group that he or she belongs to. Tradition, as Vandana said, is not static. Therefore, neither is heritage. It is a complex, evolving idiom, a cross-cultural amalgam of ever-changing ideas. In fact, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the very first Prime Minister of India, said that the story of India's textiles was evocative of the country's history itself. The trade routes were great influences in this cross-cultural exchange, where travelers would often stay in a country or route to learn techniques. India has also been colonized by cultures with the influence both enriching and diminishing. One such was the British imperial system, where many weavers lost their livelihood. However, Mahatma Gandhi brought renewed attention by making khadi the livery of India's freedom struggle. He said that personality is built through crafts, through the use of hands. Am I still online? I've lost my network.
Yeah, no, we are listening to you. Yes.
Okay. Even so, we wouldn't have a vibrant heritage to celebrate if it had not been for the tireless work of visionaries that came after independence. I remember Jaslin recounting how she walked from village to village, trailing behind Kamladevi Chattopadhyay in their quest for crafts that could be saved. The heritage we take pride in as a living tradition is much more than cloth or fashion. And the one thing that we must remember is the respect that Gandhiji attributed to working with our hands, more so today in this digital age where we have lost patience and the art of slowness, the very essence of textile making. Design today is a dynamic activity that draws upon textile crafts for inspiration and expression. But is this enough to sustain them in the future? Let's take a look at some of the work that is being done with handcrafting. So we have kantha here, and kantha was done traditionally on 2-3 layers of old fabric, saris, etc. And the red and black threads were removed from the border to do the embroidery with a running stitch. However, they have added something like 43 stitches to this repertoire, including cross stitch, which is called seam core, because they need they press the fabric in 3 places to do this. This is traditionally how they work, and this is also how they work in some of the areas. And this is Sunita Shankar. With her trademark minimalistic style, she has lent such elegance to the kantha. After completing their household chores, women would sit in a group, as we saw, for an afternoon chat and embroider. This hasn't changed much for Malika's kantha, and this is one of the kanthas, and that's an image of their craftspeople. Sunetra is a NIST graduate, and she uses the professional embroider's adda. Can we go back, please? Vijay, can we go back?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And she draws the design, these very, very complex, intricately embroidered fabrics, where a large chunk of the embroidery is done by Sunetra herself, where she fills in the running stitch variations of kantha herself. She's also experimented with this metallic kantha, which gives it sort of looks like a brocade. But this is where kantha was, and this is where it's come, like the tradition, like the evolving traditions. Next, please. So we have the next slide. Yeah. So Sujani is similar to kantha, as you can see, using recycled cloth to tack the fabric layers with a running stitch. Kantha has transcended this very basic simplicity, while Sujani has retained the more ascetic character. And here's Swati Kalsi. I think she does wonders with Sujani, giving it a whole new lease of life as a high fashion garment. And she even plays around with this, where you can see it's red on red, but the gold is left in loose ends, etc. So that's it's quite an innovation coming from the traditional Sujani. We can have the next slide. So chicken is one of the finest embroidery traditions, and Alka showed us a delightful piece, which originated in East Bengal to become a symbol of Lucknowi culture that flourished in the courts of the Nawabs of Awadh. It goes beyond just embellishment of the fabric, because it included work on the seams with hatkati, the full dadars ka kaam, with the paisley, and many more. Shivan and Naresh, again, they're all students of NIST actually. Some of them are my students too. They are sourcing the fabric, and they've only recently begun working. And what they do is they contrast it with something like tribal motifs, and they give it a very contemporary look. Here, they've also done some external work on the extraneous work on the chikankari. But this is also one of their fabrics, which is the applique flat work of chikankari. We can go on. So mirror work is now synonymous with the nomadic pastoral communities of Kutch. This is a kurti worn today. The slide was taken in 2019 before the lockdown by the Meghwal community of Hurpo. These embroideries add hope and color to an otherwise arid landscape. However, Abraham and Thakur have taken this completely out of context. Increase the size of the mirrors. I don't think it's glass. You couldn't possibly wear glass. And the black on black is again a very, very urban predilection, far removed from what is going on in the villages. We can move on. Next one, please. Yeah. So Kutch has a diverse embroidery tradition and many embroidery styles and stitches. Maggie Baxter has been working in Australia and has been working with the embroiderers of Kutch through Sudan for the last 20 years. She works with block print and especially with Paku embroidery. She is particularly drawn to this raised stitch, which is a combination of a square chain stitch and a densely filled buttonhole stitch. This is the Paku is done by the Soda community, and this is Ganga Bai of the Soda community who does this work. This is the Paku that is done by Sujan embroiderers, and this is a blow up of the stitch which is used here. Maggie's work, unlike garments, finds itself displayed in exhibitions and art galleries, and is a good example of cross-cultural exchange. Yes, we can have the next one. Well, most of the work seen thus far has been interventions by designers. Bankar Shamji Vishram, who is interacting with national designers, not only refine the color palette. This was the original color palette, the Rabadi shawl that they wore for the men of the Rabadi community. And this is the kind of color palette that they're coming up with now. And this has been done by him himself, by observing, and they also make these kind of very fine cotton saris, completely at ease with their own culture. The motifs remain the same, and so does the culture. And this, to my mind, is where all crafts and craft people should be heading, not emulating the urban lifestyle, but celebrating their own. We can move on. Block printing. So we have Bodhi working in Baroda, who have their own little unit where they create their own blocks, they design their own blocks, and they add hand painting and weave and the embroidery to it. Then we have Sunita Shankar with her, again, trademark minimal Bagru printing. And this is the block printers with their tools, which many of you are probably familiar with. Now, this is Denise Chipper. He is a third generation printer from a family of printers in Bagru. He's also a student of fashion at IICD in Jaipur. And I had the privilege of teaching him before the lockdown started. He loves to experiment with Bagru. He's perfectly adapted and can give a class to his fellow students, which he did. And he experiments with the color green. He likes to do that because that is a whole new color for this region. Using indigo, they use only natural dyes. And this is a traditional Bagru print. And Sunita doesn't go very far from it, but you can see that he is, which is another direction I think that crafts should be taking, where they are equally responsible for the creativity as the production. Yes, we can go forward. Amplification and enlargement is a strategy that the Biswasis have employed for redefining the already very complex Jamdani sari. I am told that this is now de rigueur to wear these enlarged motifs, and almost all the weavers are making them now. So as Vandana said, they are the trendsetters. Rumi and Bapaditya are also graduates from it. They work in many modes of handcrafting. So you have the very, very plain matha weave, which is done by very downtrodden weavers in Bengal, and the Abir sari, which I am wearing today. I'm wearing this one, which is a very affordable handloom sari. So we're talking about handlooming affordable. This is one of them. I think the sari costs about 800-900 rupees, which is quite affordable today. Bappa is also very adept at hand painting with natural dyes. He's working with indigo on fabric, and he's creating this for the craft triennale in Perth. They work very closely with the weavers to build trust and be able to incorporate these changes. Because you can imagine it might be de rigueur now, but it wasn't when they first started it, and they were the trendsetters in this regard. They believe that adaptation and modification is a way forward for crafting. We can move forward. Well, all the people you have seen thus far have been fashion designers. Poonam Pandit is a textile designer and also one of my students. The Kundi Sari in Goa is possibly the most neglected handloom of this country. The late Wendell Rodrigues was instrumental in reviving interest, but it is Poonam who is single-handedly taking this forward. She has a very close working equation with Kaka, who's possibly the last surviving master of this fabric. And you can see they work hand in hand. And she has transformed this very, very simple fabric from these kind of colors which were traditionally worn to soft pastels that evoke the color of the sea, and creating scarves and stoles, which she markets in as a brand as Kalakar. We can go on to the next one. Alka talked about the chintz, and I think Vandana did too. Chintz, as we know, is a trade textile, and it epitomizes the artistic exchange across cultures. Traditionally painted with buffalo milk, natural dyes, modern wax and dung, it was an arduous process, now lost to synthetic dyes. A 17th century Dutch agent observed that very slowly, like snails which creep on and appear not to advance. Yes, he who would wish to depict patience would need no other object than such a painter. In search of this lost knowledge, Renuka Reddy paints with a color, using modern and natural dyes, relishing the opportunity to work with a hand. But here, the chintz has been transformed by Abraham and Thakur by using it as an embroidery. I hope you can see the detail of the embroidery here. They've taken the floral chintz patterns and made it into, and not done it with the kalamkari technique, but with the embroidery. You can have the next one, which is my last slide. Brocade. Now, Ekaya is a brand that creates brocades for the last 120 years as a generation. I think they're more a brand than they are weavers, but they have about 8,000 weavers they have worked with over the years. Their fabrics mostly use the kadwa technique, which is where I'm wearing one of those, where you cannot see the end, the back thread. It's a weft dominated pattern. But Rahul Jain, who's a erudite scholar and a technical virtuoso, he takes this level, this fabric to another level altogether with complex brocades, damask, and more. Some of these fabrics were developed in the first and second millennium, and he develops them as a contemporary experiment in his workshop Asha in Banaras. They are mostly from the draw loom technique, which was, he says, was the sort of first kind of the prototype for the mechanized loom, where you could have the weft, the warp and the weft define the design. All the looms in the world which supported this technique, the Mughals, the Safavid Iran, the Ottoman Turkey, have all fallen silent, and he is reviving it today. And some of these fabrics you see here have taken about 25 years to develop. He draws inspiration from these old manuscripts and paintings, you know, what the Mughals wore, and he incorporates that into his designs. He gives us an idea of what has been and is possible through hand weaving. Because if you can imagine these densely embroidered, the densely patterned cloths woven by machine, they will lose all the quality that the hand can give them. They will become stiff and like, you know, things you just want to paste on a wall, like wallpaper. As we have seen, fabulous work is being done. But my question is the process an integrated one or merely cosmetic? Is it sufficient to sustain the continuance of an art that is marginalized in an era where working with the hand defies the tide? In addition, and this is very important as far as I'm concerned, the once dual role of craftsman as artist-producer has changed. Now the designer ideates and the craftsman reproduces, with no significant role in conceptualizing the fabric he makes. And thus, the value attributed becomes that of skilled labor and not of an artist-producer. Handcrafting is and has been a celebration of life. By virtue of communion with the spirit of one's being as we work, inculcating authentic spiritual values, not learned through scriptures, but authentic spiritual values, slowing time to focus on the subtler nuances of being human. And I'm sure most of you have noticed among the craftsmen that you meet, most of them, especially those who actually do the work with the hands, are humble, generous, and dignified, despite the odds they may face. I think these are things we need to pay attention to, as well as the designing of it and the marketing of it. Because handcrafting without emphasis on the hand, what's going to be left? So I think it is fundamental to create greater awareness of and inculcate a contemporary culture of working with the hand. Ms. Subroto said that we should create a contemporary culture of studying in the museums and redefine that. I think that all our institutions, including from the schools, should go back to teaching what it means to work with the hand. I remember the students in London, I wanted to do ikat, and I got a book on Japanese ikat, kasuri, which is relatively simple. What a mess I made. And I have never forgotten that lesson. It taught me how complex the art form is. It taught me how to respect that art form. And I think unless we get involved and see what it is like, we are never going to attribute that kind of respect to it.
Thank you. Shall we conclude?
I have just one more thing to
please.
say. That to cultivate authentic spiritual values embedded in this kind of activity, where, as Ananda Kumaraswamy said, the Hindu view of art, which is post-Vedas and before Manu, treats the practice of art as a form of yoga and identifies aesthetic emotion with that felt when the self perceives the self. The primary reason that the crafts of yore were able to sustain the man, corpus anima et spiritus, in mind, body, and spirit. Therefore, should it be any different today, if the same authentic values and principles of self-awareness are applied? Thank you.
Absolutely stunning and poignant to some extent, Gobika, because you have talked about the handlooms and the embroideries and the embellishments and the work which is done are having some encoding of the values of those craftsmen encoded into it, and that is the ethics and values which we need to really respect about. And you will be happy that probably you would have already read The Cloth That Changed the World, the book of edited by Sarafi in Royal Ontario Museum, has come out only last year, and that is they are attributing chintz as the cloth which changed the world. And it all started with the 11th and 12th century in Calicut, the Portuguese traders coming, and 17th and 18th century Europe, it became a rage. And India can actually create from handlooms and for those kind of fabrics, world, beating fabrics and products. So the stories of revival, the stories which Vandana, Professor Vandana Bhandari and you have narrated are really heartwarming. And I think this is the celebration, truly the celebration that there is revival happening, there is rediscovery happening, there is reinterpretation happening, and we are seeing a completely new genre of people giving it more value and meaning. And that is very optimistic to look at India's traditional handlooms and textiles, how they are going to be revived. See,
Dr.
all this was said.
Give me only 10 minutes, otherwise I have many more slides
I know.
and many more things
I know.
to share.
Yeah, I'm very sorry about, and we are at the last presentation is actually interweaving all what you said, how we can make it marketable and commercial models. Because, all the listeners are going to be inspired and enthralled with what you said, all of you said. But how is it going to make some money? How is the craft connected to commerce? How can actually create new business models? And that is where Somesh Singh, who is an entrepreneur now with the Craft Village, set up, as well as, his entrepreneurial mind was always that of an innovator. And during this COVID times, some of the innovations which he has created has won many international awards. So he is a big inspiring figure for the generation next. I present Somesh Singh, a very dear colleague and friend always. So Professor Somesh Singh.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much, all the speakers, they have spoken about such amazing heritage and legacy that, now I feel I'm totally, out of place, but that's absolutely fine. Let me find a place so that, it links to the broader, perspective of it. So I'm going to share a bit of, my presentation as well. Can you see the presentation, please? Can you see the presentation, please?
Yes.
See it, you can put it full screen, sir.
Yeah, I will do that. Okay, so yeah. So I'm coming to the first part, and interestingly, we started Craft Village in 2015. So the idea was very different. So when we were starting Craft Village, we had very little money, so we had to build a campus. So the bank asked for a project report. They said, we will give you a loan, but you have to build a project report. So we had to make a project report with whatever limited knowledge. And thanks to Dr. Koshi, with him at Institute of Apparel Management, I worked on so much of finance that I gained some bit of insight into, how to put together the financial sheets and everything. And that really helped me to put together a project report. But when we were putting the context in the project report, the figure which I saw was very, very alarming. It said that since 1990s, almost 30% of the craft person have become a daily wage labor. So when we say craft person, it is about handicraft. It is about handloom. It is about all kind of craft person coming together. Now that was a major thing that actually shook us. looking at that this is really something, which is to worry. And how I link that to current example is that we have got a project on camel breeding from Government of India. So, of course, we had Master Errol Pius Nelson. We were very happy. Now it is about training. So master is there. Now we have to look at, who's going to get the training. So we started calling in Jaisalmer and Kutch. We could not find even a single person, who's doing it. Which means, imagine, we just have literally a last person doing that kind of, textile, braiding into the entire realm of, India. So that was the starting point. And then when we, dug a bit deeper, we realized that everybody is working towards survival and revival. There is no discussion that is happening on growth and succession. Succession is very important. I'm sorry to say, but this is, as Dr. Koshi very rightly said, that I'm Gen Next, and I truly feel that I'm Gen Next, because if I look at all the leading names in the craft industry, I do not know who's going to succeed them after 5 years. Similarly, if I look at all the artisans, which is completely, massive aging population, ask them. I mean, recently I had a talk with Lalita Vakil of Chamba Rumal, Maya Sikdar of Kantha. And, we were talking to them. They said, we've become so old now, our vision has also become very, very blurred. It is very difficult for us to, embroider these textiles. And we are not able to do that. We were talking about the future and future plans. They said, now we are not in even condition to do these embroideries further. So we have to make a strategic shift from survival revival mode to growth and succession. That's the first thing which I want to emphasize on today. So when we started Craft Village, what was the dilemma? There was a dilemma. We looked at value chain. We looked at what is called supply chain. We realized that everybody is working back end. Everybody is going to villages, training artisans, training craft person, training weaver. Government is doing that. NGOs are doing that. Organizations are doing that. What are you really doing at front end? Were you building a brand? Were you looking at a retail supply chain or retail chain across the world, which is very powerful? Have you really built a massive brand which is going to attract the imagination of urban and global population? There was nothing. There was very little front end. And I can tell from my first-hand experience that when we started Craft Village, people used to come and they will say, we have to learn pottery and painting. Now you end up, spending hours and hours explaining that, look, this is not just the craft, which is there. If you talk about craft, you have kalamkari, you have madhubani, you have fulkari, there's a range of names which is existing. Why you're not talking about that? So the basic point we realized in 2015-16 was that there is oversupply and there is less demand. That was the basic, problem with the craft sector and with every sector. So now this was the biggest challenge because we had to work on, ensuring that the demand and supply matches so that, all the dead stocks, weavers and artisans they have started sitting on and the kind of inventories, they have made years over years is actually not moving, Their finances is stuck, their everything is stuck, they are really not moving anywhere. So what was the core of the problem? We realized that, everybody's treating this not for profit sector. CSR, that was a major component that came into being. And of course, it is an unorganized sector. I don't hesitate to say, because being even in craft space for now 6 years, we have not, we are hardly working with people who are into the craft space. Nobody is interested to partner. Nobody is interested to work together. I don't know what kind of actually space is this. This is sometimes, it also really bothers me that why we are not willing to partner with each other. And second is why we are, so firm that we want to make it not for profit. If you're not earning profit, you're not going to give anything to artisan. And as a result, what will they be earning? And slowly, if they don't earn anything, they will never going to continue their tradition or whatever. It will become a history. It will become a nice piece of history, tradition, everything. The second dilemma was for craft sector, we realized, and especially, even hand-woven handlooms. You look at 3-4 days in the social media, you'll find, oh, I love handmade on, on something which is coming Independence Day or Mahatma Gandhi's Janam Din and all that, But we have not been really able to shift the axis from sympathy to desire. And, and it is very important that what is that imagery which is built in people's mind. We are all the time, asking, please help artisan. Please help artisan, give donation. I mean, is that the way how you're going to build $1 billion industry? Never. You have to really shift that sympathy access to desire, where people themselves say, oh yes, that's the piece of history, that's the piece of heritage, that's the piece of something, which I would like to possess and keep in my, possession, because it is so important, that I aspire and desire for it. So that was the interesting dilemma, which we really saw. And as a result, as I was telling you also, that we started a massive membership program drive, and we started looking at the annual income of the artisans. We realized most of them are filling 50,000 rupees, 60,000 rupees, 70,000 rupees. So an average income of less than 5,000 rupees a month. Now, is it really good enough to even survive? Think of, think in terms of a family, husband, wife, 1 or 2, 3 children, and then they have to also, manage the entire thing. They don't even, this is not even sufficient to survive their entire family. Forget inspiring their Gen Next to join the sector. So that's been, our very, very clear observation. We call so many Gen Next. We always encourage artisans to bring their children to Craft Village or to India Craft Week, so that at least, they try and get inspired. But when we talk to those children, they say, "Isme kya rakha hua hai?" I mean, why we see our parents working so hard, but they don't get even, they are not able to, meet the ends, etc. So this was again, very, very interesting, finding. So we reached to a interesting dilemma, and Gopika spoke about this very, very well. The first part is preserve and protect. So it is very important to know that craft is not a technique. And I think, most of the people make a mistake here. Look at any craft documentation. The majority of craft documentations part is technique focus, You make this motif, you make that motif, you make that embroidery. It's not technique. You have to understand that it's come from their complete experience of an artisan, from their cultural, heritage, ritual, and everything, put together, they create something, they have their own stories embedded into these textiles. It is not just, something which has just come like that. I mean, when I was talking to Mahamaya Sikdar about Kantha, when I looked at her massive pieces, I said, what is it which you have made? She said, it's my daily story. So Katha, the story, my daily stories, I basically embroider. And you can see all these fascinating textiles with my own stories, So she showed 30 pieces. And within that, each piece has her own story. And what brilliant collection, it was. Similarly, if you speak to Gurupa Chetty or Niranjan, for Kalamkari, you realize, my God, what kind of fantastic ideation stories they bring in. And one of the very interesting part was Nina Sabnani's experiment with fur painting on water conservation. Fur painting is again a textile, narrative textile from Bhilwara. How much of they could save gallons and gallons of water into the entire region of Rajasthan just by using a certain bit of, textile painting into that. So it's important that we must preserve and protect the basic cultural part of the technical of traditional textiles. Is very important, because if you just treat them like a technique, change the language, instead of Chamba Rumal, for example, you have Ras Leela or Chaucer or hunting, you make Mahatma Gandhi or you make Guru Nanak Dev. Now you've actually changed the entire, concept of textile. Nobody will be able to even, understand and even associate that what the piece of textile is. Second is economy of scale. Very important, because also work with Adyam Hand Wovens, which is the unit of Aditya Birla. And my first question was to them that if suppose they get very big orders from an international buyer, will they be able to produce that? And he was very clear. He said, no, they cannot. Which means there is not basic infrastructure in place, even after so many years of working into those clusters. They're working in, they're working in Pochampalli, they're working in Banaras, they're working in Kutch. These 3 clusters they're working. But imagine there is not adequate infrastructure in those places, which is there. And therefore, out of these 2 dilemmas, we started 2 initiatives called International Craft Awards, which is to recognize artisans, because people like, for example, Bimla Datta, who was 85-year-old in Madhubani, she never got an award in her entire life, doing such fabulous work. And before she dies, who's going to recognize her? You have to identify people like that to make sure that they get recognition at time. Similarly, India Craft Week, to ensure that, the global consumers, global buyers have direct interface with the artisans. And I must tell you, and I'm very proud to inform, Dr. Koshi, in fact, visited. Dr. Koshi, in 5 days, they did a sale of, now cumulative is 13 crores. So which is not bad in a time of pandemic, if they could do such a massive sale. It shows that there's a huge potential of, a traditional handicraft, it is being done into an handloom, it is done into a very proper manner. So, I mean, okay, I talked about problems, but what is the way out? So therefore, there are ways out which we have to really now figure out and start looking at. One is build hand woven as an organized industry. Yesterday also, when Sir was taking the basic briefing session, I was telling him that I am registering a company and I want to put into craft, hand woven, but I can't see a segment anywhere. So none of there in the government system itself, there is nothing which recognizes craft or handicraft or handloom as a sector. It does not. So therefore, if it does not, it says fashion design, textile design, interior design, furniture design, all those things are there. But where is handloom, handicraft? I'm working in that sector. I need that sector to be part of, what if I'm registering my industry or even company, I need that. So it's not there. Then bringing stakeholders together, very, very scattered, as I was telling. Everybody's working. I mean, for example, if you go to a cluster, you see 5 people working on the same thing in that cluster. Why? I mean, you could really, work together and look at 5 different clusters and, and work with your own strength rather than working on the same clusters and many clusters, nobody's working at all. So therefore, it is very important that stakeholders like government, industries, institutions, individuals, artisans, and people, they have to all come together and they have to work towards a larger goal, which is to really, look at how to revive. And we have also described each stakeholders, roles and responsibilities, which a link I can share with Dr. Vijay later. And you can go through it that, how we have done that. Second interesting thing is we also classified the clusters into something which is important. So cluster is not just a cluster definition. You have to look at cluster from 3 different perspectives. Individual driven clusters, where there are a lot of individuals doing things, versus community driven clusters, versus industry clusters, which is like Bhadoi or Khurja or Muradabad. These are all industry clusters. Now you can't have a same kind of strategic perspective in all these 3 clusters, no, because these 3 clusters have a different modus operandi. They are basically based on different kind of principles and they have different set of problems to be addressed. But we have really not defined clusters in the manner it should be defined. We just say, 220 clusters, 300 clusters. But what? I mean, what kind of clusters are they? What kind of, diagnosis they need? And then bringing Gen Next. Now, this has become a real trouble at this point of time. With aging population is a big worry. Look at Khatris, look at Rogan's Khatris, look at, Chamba Rumals, or even for that matter, look at Ikkat even. You will find most of the woven clusters, you will find a lot of aging population. What next? Is there a plan? Has there been a training that is being organized? Has there been a succession plan that is being worked out? If suppose imagine these people just go out in few years or they are no more, what are you going to lose? You are going to lose such a massive part of your heritage and culture in no time. So there is no thinking which we have done, and we have to really, do a bit of thinking on this front. Then empower artisans directly. Now this is very important. I was having a meeting in Srinagar with one of the Pashmina weavers, and I don't want to name the designer, but he said something which really, which really pierced my heart. He said, 30 years back, this XYZ designer, she used to work with us. Today, she's such a big designer, sir. वो कहाँ पहुँच गए, हम कहाँ रह गए. Now imagine something like this coming from an artisan. What kind of feeling are there inside their heart, Which means sometimes, I really feel that, I hope designers have not used them. That kind of feeling should not remain with them because they will stop. And as a result, what happened? He had 1,200 weavers working, 10 years back. Today, he's only working with 65 weavers. Imagine the kind of weaver loss, the net skill loss that has happened in such a span of time. So it's very important that, we have to treat artisans more as a partner than to, as a daily wage labor or a handmade labor, etc., which is not a right idea. And there where I completely agree with Gopika, that it is important that we must use sense and sensibilities of these artisans into the entire process. And then mind to market approach using technology to leverage. We have trained a lot of artisans in technology. We are doing it day in and out. Right now, the entire technology, usage is happening in terms of how do they do good photography of their product, for that matter, So every day we are having sessions with almost 30 artisans every day, that how do you really shoot your, your products professionally, so that, they learn basics and they can leverage that through WhatsApp, through Facebook, through Instagram, and they can create a, useful channel for them. And then invite investment and shift from not for profit to profit. That's the aim which we have now dedicated for, that we are going to make this a for profit industry. so that at least income increases 5x to 10x in next 5 years. If we can't do that, I'm sure that in 5 years, I'm going to quit this industry for sure. So what is the way out? Now, it's very important. I mean, because, since we are going through an entire process of investment for Craft Village, and therefore, we are talking to a lot of investment bankers, and we have also investment, professionals. Now, they were telling something which was really alarming. They said, Byju's, after Byju's, each education institution's value or education business value is now valued at 40x. So whatever your turnover is multiplied by 40 times. Now that has happened. Imagine just Byju's has changed the entire game. Before that, nobody was willing to invest even in education business. I mean, I know Dr. Koshi knows that how much, we were looking at this page at some point of time, and there was so much of, difficulty in getting investment for education-based business. Similarly, Zomato, it has crossed 1 lakh, crores market cap in no time. It was trying to raise only 9,000 crore, but look at, the kind of size it has reached and what kind of impact it will have now on the food business, in totality. Similarly, can we have venture capitalist, angel investor, bank institution, and create an investment portfolio or investment profile or investment funding, which is very important. And in terms of e-commerce, if you look at Jaipur.com raised around 70 crores, which is $10 million. And Gocoup raised around, 830,000 USD in funding rounds. It is very, very small. Most organizations are at the size of, 3 to 7 crores. And brand under 20 crores. Exceptions are like 2,000 crore for Fab India. Good Earth is 350 crores, and Sabyasachi again is at 350 crores. Is of course value more, but this was the funding which he's got from Reliance. So the point is that we have to brand handloom as the necessity, and we are at a right time. People are talking about sustainability. They are talking about circular, economy. They are talking about carbon negative fabrics. They are talking of all these kind of things. But have we really been able to brand and move so light speed that our handloom fabrics have actually been fitting into all these kind of criteria which world is talking about and they are wanting to procure? Have we really, fit into this kind of perception which actually world is looking at? That's the question. Then creating infrastructure to scale through common facility center. Common facility center is very important. And this is what we have given as a feedback to Invest India, which is a division of Prime Minister's office, that please in each district, each place or each city or village, please start setting up common facility center. There's a lot of money which is there. If you don't do it, you can never scale it. So that's what they have started now on a large scale process. Then ethical, responsible are the new codes of consumption. Can we really have the brand and promotions focused into those areas so that, it really reaches to a massive audience all over the world and they become the responsible consumers for the kind of fabrics and textiles, which we have for a long time. Then documentation of craft. Now it's very important that we have always talked about aesthetics, history, all those kind of emotions and all kind of, those things. But have you ever talked about science, engineering, and extraordinary feature, which these textile possesses? And I just wanted, this is very difficult to read, but I will again share with Dr. Vijay to read this. Most of the facts which are mentioned here, you will not find even in any document. Now, this has already happened because, I eventually had a chat with Govardhan Gajam and I ate his head for 3 days. He could then give me, some bit of this information. Now, it is very important that we also bring less known knowledges of each of these textiles into the perspective so that it can be shared with the world and a lot of things they can pick out of, these things which are not talked about or not documented. Donna Karen New York did fantastic work. And as Dr. Kushi was saying that if there are so many problems, what is the model? That's very important. So Donna Karen New York created something called co-create. That's what she very proudly call it. And she's partnered with African artisans in this entire process. They made a multi-million-dollar business under the brand Donna Karen New York. And 50% of the profit sharing is done with the artisans directly. That's the first brand in the world which is sharing profits directly with the artisans. Now, imagine if that is the kind of business. If our Indian enterprises, your Indian designers, they develop partnership with weavers, artisans, and share equal profit. What kind of scenario? What kind of things it will really become? So, therefore, in summary, I wanted to make my presentation very concise. So, innovation, it is very important, and innovation. I just want to give another example. Pashmina weaver, again, I was talking about. So what happened is, when he was telling that only 65 weavers are remaining, So what is the road ahead? As we was telling that nobody buys shawls now. Stoles also we are trying to sell, it is not selling. So what should we do? So then we thought that why not to convert this into textiles? So we got few shawls and then we gave to the faculty of Pearl Academy and students. They tried stitching it, but they could not, because it tears the entire fabric when they try and stitch on the machine. So it was not possible to make anything. I mean, they can't make any garment, they can't do anything. We went back to the weaver, we said, it's not happening. What you need to find out a way, you need to think how we can make fabric so strong, the same pashmina fabric, so that we can actually stitch it, so that it can be treated as textiles. After a few days, he said, my father used to, weave my, his own jacket 50 years back. And that time they used to basically, have this weaving technique through which they could really, create fabrics that could be cut and stitched. They revived in the process a technique which they lost 60 years back. And then they developed that fabric, a yardage of 5 meters, 2.5 meters was converted into jacket, 2.5 meter was used in a couch. And in the first display and the first exhibition itself, the guy got 2 major orders from Japan and China. And they are still producing, the fabric till now. I mean, 2 years it's been, they're still producing that fabric. So one innovation, we did not do anything. I mean, we just basically, help them to think, go back, dig out. We are not designing anything. We are neither, intervening into the entire process of thinking, nothing. We are just telling that we need to diversify. We need to look into the extension of the product. Can you please provide a, base material like that, which can happen? And it created a massive, business opportunity for him. And the second is investment. It is very important that we have to make this, entire sector so attractive that people start investing in, they bring capital into this entire space. And so that, if this business becomes really massive, it is going to help all these artisans only, nobody's going to stand away with the entire money, generating it. It is going to go back to the entire ecosystem. And that entire ecosystem will flourish and also going to sustain for generation to generation. If you're not going to bring money into this entire space, believe me, by next generation, this entire story will be over. So to build a sustainable future, these are 2 most important things which I see, which we need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Somesh. I was, only wishing that you become the Baijus for the craft and fashion world, and create a new, I would say, milestones, which everybody can look up to. And I am sure that you will do it. The kind of perspective which you have presented today, if you look at in the entire webinar, we have moved through this. We posed the problems. We looked at, how the history of traditions are really preserved. Went on to exemplify, showing classic examples of Indian traditions. Went on to design schools which are reviving some of these and doing good work. And then presented a model, for, these crafts and textile traditions to be taken forward. My only point which I rue and regret is that when I was director of NID, we set up the first national design business incubator, which was inaugurated by our Honorable Prime Minister at that time, who was the Chief Minister at that time. We inaugurated on February 15th, 2005, the first national design business incubator with a 10 crore rolling fund, which was then provided by the Department of DIPP. Now it's called DIPAM. But I am surprised that I was a faculty member and head of fashion management NIFT in 1987, 86, 87 to 2000. After 21, 30 years, even 3 decades, there is no fashion design business incubator. These entrepreneurs whom Sanjay Garg and people Gopika mentioned and all this would have really scaled up and found their foot faster to propone, to take up a hedonistic craft and propagate it as new luxury or whatever, new interpretations their ideas give. If there was this platform, we spent crores and crores of rupees into unviable schemes. So today, the message which I want to give at this fag end of the seminar after such brilliant presentations is that at least on the 75th Independence Day, the government should come out with a large scheme outlay for promoting fashion craft entrepreneurs, which can take off the design business incubator model, which I created in 2005, to a large number in every district. 739 districts are there in India. If there is one such centers for craft and fashion and lifestyle products to be set up by a selection process like the seed fund startup seed fund setup, which government has created, if that is stretched and created especially for the textile sector, which is 40 million plus 100 million livelihoods. This is all what we should remember today as we celebrate tomorrow, the 75th, Independence Day, because we need to protect and preserve, as Somesh rightly said. First stage is that preserve and nurture, because these are languishing and disappearing skills. You cannot pay any amount of money, but you cannot get this back. And this is a very, very, very significant, important thing. And then go on to forget about this not-for-profit approach, create sufficient surplus which you can share and improve the quality of life for the weavers and for the artisans and for the handicrafts, Shilpa gurus and others in this country. So with this, I want to give a big thank you to each one of the panelists today. It has been beyond expectations, the kind of unraveled wisdom which has come through all of you. And there are participants who are still holding on after 2 hours of this discussions, means that it was very engrossing, very engaging, very edifying. And I'm sure that some of the models which you have talked about today, whether it's an international contextualization of Indian traditions, as Archana said, or is it the craft processes to be rediscovered with ethics, values, and the encoded lives of these people, as Gobika said, or the kind of traditions which Professor Alka Pandey explained, or the kind of revival stories which Vandana narrated, or the way to look at museums as part of the education process in India. We have had a great evening today. And I want to leave it to Professor Dr. Vijay Yadav, the Honorary Secretary and Treasurer, to say a word of thanks to conclude, and wish all those who are attending and those who are going to listen on the YouTube channel of Textile Sector Skill Council, and those who have attended on the Facebook, a big thank you to all. Celebrate our 75th Independence Day with great enthusiasm and frolic and fun, and believe that we have great traditions to nurture and go forward. So much. Take care, stay safe, enjoy.